Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Gary Parker. Today we have episode 403 for November 18th, 2024. And it's a special episode. It's the one I do every year. Along with the regular news today, my tip of the week is going to be a quick summary, a highlights, if you will, of my best and worst gift guide. This is something I've been doing every year for many, many years now, actually. And so basically every year I try to put together a list of the things that you should avoid giving people for the holidays with the gift-giving season coming up, and some alternative ideas, things that would actually improve someone's security and privacy. So that will be this week's tip of the week after we do the news. Real quick, couple things. If you have an Android phone, there's been a couple nasty bugs fixed recently, including some actively exploited, if limited, targeting attacks. Nevertheless, there's a big update coming, so make sure you're looking for updates to your Android phones and get those applied as soon as you get them. I will say one more thing. I'm actually out of town as you hear this. I was on vacation this weekend, so I recorded this a little bit early. So if something major happened in the last few days and I don't mention it here, that is why. And I'll cover it when I get back for the next show. Okay, so we have a news show for you today. We're going to start off with an article from Cyber Insider, which I don't often quote, but I found this one interesting, about a popular Chrome extension that has gone bad. And I really just going to want to focus on the broader topic of rogue extensions. Also, some sad news from Mozilla. They have laid off 30% of their staff, and that was the second layoff this year. I've got some thoughts on that. I've got another article on how bad guys are using the emergency information process to bypass a lot of protections, allowing people to request personal info while pretending to be a law enforcement agent. We've talked about this before, but we've got some more troubling news on that front. Apple has quietly introduced a very interesting feature for iPhones that causes them to reboot spontaneously for the purpose of security. And I'll explain how that works. Microsoft has announced that Windows 10 support will officially end in just about a year. I've got several comments about what you might want to be doing about that. Got an article about a free decryptor that has been released for a BitLocker-based ransomware variant called ShrinkLocker, followed by just some general tips on how to deal with ransomware. Signal just released a very interesting new feature that allows you to do group video calls without actually having to create a Signal group first. Malwarebytes has an interesting article about cheap air fryers that are actually using their associated smart apps to spy on you. And back to Apple, they have also just announced an interesting new feature for AirTags that I want to let you know about. And then we'll get to my tip of the week, which is the annual Best and Worst Gift Guide Roundup. So lots to talk about. Let's get to it. All right, first up, this is from Cyber Insider, which I don't think I even knew about this. I'm not sure how I came across this article. But anyway, it's about a popular Chrome extension called Hide YouTube Shorts that has turned malicious. A Chrome extension titled Hide YouTube Shorts, used by 100,000 people, was recently discovered to secretly collect users' browser activity, raising serious concerns about user privacy on Google Chrome Web Store. Despite appearing to fulfill its stated purpose of hiding YouTube Shorts, the extension was caught transmitting detailed user data to an external server on AWS, or Amazon Web Services, potentially exposing numerous users to data theft and phishing attacks. The issue, brought to light by a GitHub user investigating suspicious activity, highlights significant security gaps in Google's vetting of Chrome extensions. The extension's activity initially sparked suspicion when users began noticing unusual search suggestions on YouTube in various languages, seemingly disconnected from their search history. Further investigation into the extension's network activity revealed it was sending URLs, including specific paths and parameters, alongside other identifying information to a remote server on AWS. Detailed analysis uncovered that the extension was capturing sensitive browsing data, including a unique user ID, installation ID, timestamps, and potentially sensitive data from form entries. Originally developed by a GitHub user named Probably Raging, the extension was taken over by a different developer, Ronnie Shylop. The GitHub repository for the extension was archived in September of 2023, and the extension's behavior changed shortly afterward, suggesting a malicious modification post-transfer. During this transition, the extension adopted broader permissions, which allowed it to access and transmit all visited URLs, or web addresses. The developer defended these permissions in public comments, disregarding user concerns and signaling possible intentional misuse. The Hide YouTube Shorts extension's unauthorized data collection capabilities give it broad potential to exploit user information, from viewing browsing history to sensitive credentials. Browser extensions, often granted high-level permissions, can read web traffic, access form data, and send out HTTP requests silently, even when set to specific pages like YouTube. Since Google's Chrome Web Store does not currently monitor such permissions rigorously, malicious extensions like this can infiltrate browsers with minimal oversight, endangering user privacy. The Chrome Web Store, serving millions, has previously come under scrutiny for hosting malicious extensions. Despite Google's promises to improve extension security, many users report that the Chrome Web Store lacks sufficient reporting mechanisms and security checks, unlike Mozilla's add-ons store. In this case, the extension continued to collect data and attract users even after reviews indicated potential security issues, and is still listed on the web store. For users who have installed the Hide YouTube Shorts extension, immediate action is recommended. First, uninstall the extension immediately and delete its data if possible. 2. Clear browser cache and cookies to remove potentially saved data. 3. Change all passwords used since the extension's installation, especially for sensitive accounts. 4. Enable multi-factor authentication for added security on important accounts. And 5. Monitor accounts closely for unusual activity. To avoid nasty surprises with extensions that change behavior following ownership transfers, consider installing the Under New Management extension, which constantly monitors all other extensions installed on Chrome for such changes and alerts the user accordingly. Now, I think it's kind of ironic that one of the things this article suggests you do to make yourself safer is to install yet another extension. Now, I've heard of this one before, and I think it's a great idea. But what we really need is we need the browser itself and or the web store to let us know if a browser changes owners, which is what this other extension supposedly does, this Under New Management extension. It's a great idea. And honestly, this should be done for really any software. If any software that you have installed, and that should include browser plugins, fundamentally changed ownership, and I realize that might be tricky to define, but most of these applications and plugins have a designated owner, a developer that owns the app, vouches for the app, and is explicitly the one taking responsibility for the app. If that changes, if that, it's changed to a new owner, we should be notified. And any automatic updates for that software or plugin should be halted until you have, given the go-ahead to say, yes, I trust this new owner, continue with automatic updates. At least that's kind of what I'm thinking off the top of my head would be a good solution to this problem. Maybe if maybe the devil's in the details of when you actually try to implement that, there'd be problems, but we need something like that. And, hence the need for extensions like this Under New Management. This has been a thing that's been happening a lot, and it is a vector for attack. Find a popular extension that is abandoned, or find, like a single overworked developer who's managed to create a popular extension or software app or software library or SDK, and they're overwhelmed, and you offer to come in and help or take it over, maybe pay them money to do so, and then go rogue and start slipping in malware with that extension. It's happened. There was another big story about this not that long ago. This is becoming a definite way in which bad guys are sneaking onto our systems by commandeering existing software and turning it into malware. And the other point I just want to make here is that browser extensions do have a lot of power. And it seems like we need to have a permissions structure and approval process for browser extensions, just like we do for other apps. As you install an extension, how much power does that extension have? What are you going to let that browser extension do? I think we need to have the ability to set those things at the start, know what they are. It's got to ask for those permissions. So we know what it is going to be able to do. We should be able to say yes or no to each of those permissions, which may cause the app not to work or the plugin not to work, but at least there's transparency there. And then we should be able to revisit those permissions after the fact and change them later if we decide that we want to dial them back. I guess my point here is that browser plugins are really just kind of like applications, and we need to start treating them as such. And this article implies that the Google Web Store, where you can find Chrome extensions, is somehow not as good about vetting apps for malicious behavior as the Firefox extensions store, or whatever they call it. I don't know that that's really true, but I think it's pretty safe to say that we need to focus more on the security and privacy aspects of browser plugins and put more guardrails in place to prevent, malicious extensions like this one. All right, next up, this is from TechCrunch, and I've got a couple from them today. And this is about Mozilla, and it's not great news. The Mozilla Foundation, the nonprofit arm of the Firefox browser maker Mozilla, has laid off 30% of its employees as the organization says it faces, quote, a relentless onslaught of change, unquote. According to its annual tax filings, the Mozilla Foundation reported having 60 employees during the 2022 tax year. The number of employees at the time of the layoffs was closer to 120, and this is according to a person with knowledge. When asked by TechCrunch, Mozilla's spokesperson did not dispute the figure. This is the second layoff at Mozilla this year, the first affecting dozens of employees who work on the side of the organization that builds the popular Firefox browser. Popular is a rather strong word there, since it's like low single-digit percentage of market penetration, but anyway. Mozilla is made up of several organizations, one of which is the Mozilla Corporation, which develops Firefox and other technologies, and another is its nonprofit and tax-exempt foundation, which oversees Mozilla's corporate governance structure and sets the browser maker's policies. Much of Mozilla's work focused on advocating for privacy, inclusion, and decentralization of technologies, and to, quote, create safer, more transparent online experiences for everyone, unquote, which ultimately benefit the browser maker and its users. Announcing the layoffs in an email to all employees on October 30th, the Mozilla Foundation's executive director, Nabihah Syed, confirmed that two of the foundation's major divisions, advocacy and global programs, are, quote, no longer a part of our structure, unquote. After publication, Borman told TechCrunch that, quote, advocacy is still a central tenet of Mozilla Foundation's work and will be embedded in all the other functional areas, unquote, without providing specifics. Now, I actually had kind of a heads up on this, that this was coming, and I couldn't really say anything about it. So now it's official. But yeah, this is not good news. Mozilla's deal with Google, which is their primary funding source, basically Google pays them a lot of money to make Google the default search engine on the Firefox browser, which you are free to change, and you're encouraged to change. But the tyranny of the default says that most people will never change it, and which is why Google pays a lot of money to Mozilla to make it the default. That deal is going away, it appears, and it was like, 80 or 90% of Mozilla's revenue. So the future does not look bright for Mozilla, and this is just another sign that things are really not going well. We may end up losing the Firefox browser. Now, it is open source, and there are two other browsers that are currently based off of the Firefox code, which is the Tor browser and Mulvad's browser. So I'm not sure either of those organizations is up to the task of taking over ownership of that and continuing to develop a web browser, which is not easy to do. But I'm really worried about Firefox as a browser and Mozilla as a company. Things are not looking good. Mozilla has made a lot of missteps over recent years, particularly at the management level. The CEO has gotten a lot of flack for getting paid an awful lot of money, and they've just made some weird decisions. So, I really like the Firefox browser. I really like having diversity in browsers, because if Firefox goes away, there's only two left, Chrome and Safari is only on Apple. That would be a sad state of affairs. So if they do go under somehow, some way, I hope the Firefox browser is picked up by somebody else and continued. But I'll keep you posted. All right, next up, another article from TechCrunch. And this is about a topic we've discussed before, but it's just, it appears to be being exploited more and more. And so I just want to make sure we're aware that this is happening. And I'll give you my take when I'm done reading the story. All right, so the FBI is warning that hackers are obtaining private user information, including emails and phone numbers, from U.S.-based tech companies by compromising government and police email addresses to submit quote-unquote emergency data requests. The FBI's public notice filed this week as a rare admission from the federal government about the threat from fraudulent emergency data requests, a legal process designed to help police and federal authorities obtain information from companies to respond to immediate threats affecting someone's life or property. The abuse of emergency data requests is not new and has been widely reported in recent years. And those are two links you can click on if you want get to those stories. Those are probably the ones I covered when they happened. Now, the FBI warns that it saw an uptick around August in criminal posts online advertising access to or conducting fraudulent emergency requests, and that it was going public for awareness. Police and law enforcement in the U.S. generally need some kind of legal justification to seek and obtain access to private data that companies store on their servers. Typically, for a person's private content, like their files, emails, or messages, police need to provide enough evidence of possible crime before a U.S. court will issue a search warrant allowing the police to request that information from a private company. Police can issue subpoenas, which don't require going to court, requesting companies to access limited amounts of information about a user, such as their basic account information, like their username, account logins, email addresses, and phone numbers, and sometimes their approximate location. There are also emergency requests, a procedure in which law enforcement can urgently seek a person's information from a company in the event of an immediate risk where there is no time to seek a court order. It's these emergency requests that federal authorities say some cybercriminals are abusing. The FBI said in its advisory that it has seen several public posts made by known cybercriminals over 2023 and 2024 claiming access to email addresses used by U.S. law enforcement and some foreign governments. The FBI says this access was ultimately used to send fraudulent subpoenas and other legal demands to U.S. companies seeking private user data stored on their systems. The advisory said that the cybercriminals were successful in masquerading as law enforcement by using compromised police accounts to send emails to companies requesting user data. In some cases, the requests cited false threats, like claims of human trafficking, and in one case, that an individual would, quote, suffer greatly or die, unquote, unless the company in question returns the requested information. The FBI said the compromised access to law enforcement accounts allowed the hackers to generate legitimate-looking subpoenas that resulted in companies turning over usernames, emails, phone numbers, and other private information about their users. But not all fraudulent attempts to file emergency data requests were successful, the FBI said. Cybercriminals often use the requested data for harassment, doxing, and targeting individuals with financial fraud schemes, according to a Bloomberg report from 2022, which found at the time that hackers had obtained user information from customers of Apple and Facebook and Instagram owner Meta by filing fraudulent emergency data requests. Snap, the maker of Snapchat, and Discord were also reportedly targeted. The FBI said in its advisory that law enforcement organizations should take steps to improve their cybersecurity posture to prevent intrusions, including stronger passwords and multi-factor authentication. The FBI said that private companies, quote, should apply critical thinking to any emergency data requests received, given that criminals understand the need for exigency, unquote. Okay, so let me back up. So basically what's going on here is normally, for law enforcement to get this information from a company, I mean, some companies you could just ask, and depending on what their policies are, they may just provide it based on asking. I've definitely seen that happen in the past. But generally speaking, they need to get some sort of a court order or a subpoena or something like that. Something official, which takes time, right? You got to go through some process to get that. And if someone was legitimately in a life or death situation where you needed that information right now to save their life or to prevent their house from being blown up or whatever. There are situations where, look, I don't have time for this. I need it right now. I'll come back and get that later or whatever. And so most of these companies have a process to deal with those emergency situations. And I think in most cases, what it requires is that you email them from a legitimate law enforcement email account, FBI.gov or whatever their email accounts end in. And so what these bad guys are doing is they are compromising email accounts from former or current law enforcement officials. And so they can send email from those accounts and therefore look legit. And so that's why this thing is saying that the FBI advisory says you need to have strong passwords and multi-factor authentication because somehow these bad guys are getting into your accounts. So, of course, the bigger issue here is that this is yet another quote-unquote back door that doesn't just allow the good guys in. This is an end around. This is a bypass for the normal procedure that keeps the bad guys from normally being able to do this, to supposedly only allow the good guys access to this information. But because this process exists, it's going to be exploited by the bad guys too. I'm not sure what the answer to this specific problem is, but it's just another case study in how these sorts of privileged access mechanisms can be abused by the bad guys and not just used by the good guys. All right, next up, this one is really interesting. It was fun to see this actually develop as a story over the course of a day because the headlines kept changing. But this is kind of the final article here from 404 Media. Apple quietly introduced code into iOS 18.1, which is the latest version, which reboots the device if it has not been unlocked for a period of time, reverting it to a state which improves the security of iPhones overall and is making it harder for police to break into the devices, according to multiple iPhone security experts. On Thursday, this is last week, 404 Media reported that law enforcement officials were freaking out that iPhones, which had been stored for examination, were mysteriously rebooting themselves. At the time, the cause was unclear, with the officials only able to speculate why they were being locked out of the devices. Now, a day later, the potential reason why is coming into view. And this is a quote from a researcher with a name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, from the Hasso-Plattner Institute. I've never heard of that. They said, quote, Apple indeed added a feature called Inactivity Reboot in iOS 18.1, unquote. In a law enforcement and forensic expert-only group chat, Christopher Vance, a forensic specialist at Magnet Forensics, said, quote, we have identified code within iOS 18 and higher that is an inactivity timer. This timer will cause devices in the AFU state to reboot to a BFU state after a set period of time, which we have also identified, unquote. AFU refers to after first unlock, which is when somebody, presumably the phone's owner, has unlocked the device at least once since being powered on, and which generally can make it easier for law enforcement to unlock. BFU, or before first unlock, is when a user has not unlocked the phone since it was turned on and is typically a harder state for forensic tools to crack. This is another quote from Vance, quote, the reboot timer is not tied to any network or charging functions and only tied to inactivity of the device since last lock, unquote. 404 Media obtained multiple screenshots of Vance's messages in the group chat from a source. 404 Media granted them anonymity because members are typically not allowed to share communications from this group chat. Magnet Forensics recently acquired Grayshift, the company that makes the phone unlocking tool Gray Key. Rick Andrade, a spokesperson for Magnet Forensics, declined to comment. Quote, we can't comment on specific issues, but as Chris said, we're looking into it, unquote. Chris Wade, the founder of mobile analysis group Corellium, told 404 Media that after the fourth day of a device being in a locked state, the device reboots. Apple did not respond to multiple requests for comment about the reboots and the inactivity feature sent on Thursday and Friday. Apple did not respond to multiple requests for comment about the reboots and the inactivity feature sent on Thursday and Friday. The iOS change is the latest skirmish in the ongoing battle between phone manufacturers like Apple, whose main motivation is protecting their users' data, and forensics firms and law enforcement who want to extract data from seized devices. Initially, the law enforcement officials raised the alarm about the rebooting iPhones, speculated that the lockouts were due to their seized iPhones not being connected to a cellular network, or perhaps even an iOS 18 device somehow telling other nearby iPhones to reboot themselves. The real explanation, based on the multiple experts found, appears to be more about a certain amount of time passing rather than anything else. And this is a quote from Matthew Green, a cryptographer and associate professor at Johns Hopkins, who I would love to interview, by the way. And he told 404 Media, quote, remember that the real threat here is not the police. It's the kind of people who will steal your phone for malign purposes. This feature means that if your phone gets stolen, the thieves can't nurse it along for months until they develop the tech to crack it, unquote. Green called the feature a huge improvement in terms of security. He added, quote, I would bet that rebooting after a reasonable inactivity period probably doesn't inconvenience anyone, but does make your phone a lot more secure. So it seems like a pretty good idea, unquote. Police may feel differently, though. Vance from Magnet Forensics urged other members of the law enforcement and forensic expert group chat to collect evidence from AFU iOS 18 devices as soon as they can. Quote, it is imperative that you collect the information from your AFU devices as soon as possible with iOS 18, unquote. So I find this absolutely fascinating. First of all, I think it's really cool that Apple is even thinking about these things, and it's a great little feature to add to the phone. So it talked about this AFU BFU mode, and this is actually a good thing to know about your phones in general. If you're worried about your phone being compromised, let's say you've got even corporate intellectual property on your device, and you're about to go through, let's say, a customs or border situation where they might want to search your devices or take possession of your devices for some period of time, or confiscate them, I guess is a better way to put that. If you're worried about that scenario, you should reboot your device before going through that process, and then leave your phone in the state that it's in. Don't unlock it, because it is in this BFU state, and I don't know what Android calls it, but it's a similar concept. Before first unlock, after a reboot, when you come back up, before the first unlock, which at least on an iPhone, I don't know if Android does this. On an iPhone, you can't unlock a phone with biometrics after it's been rebooted. You have to input the PIN code, which is another reason to do it, by the way, because if you're worried about somebody forcing you to put your finger on something or show your face to something to unlock it, that won't work after you've rebooted your phone. Basically, your phone is in a more secure state right after it's been rebooted and before it's been unlocked for the first time after that reboot. And Apple has decided that if your phone has been sitting around locked for, I think it said 4 days, for a certain amount of time, it will automatically reboot itself to get into that mode, to go from AFU mode to BFU mode, which is much harder to break into. That is, as far as I'm concerned, just freaking brilliant. And yes, this is causing trouble for law enforcement officers who have confiscated these devices. And if they have already been unlocked at least once since reboot, they do have forensics tools that may be able to break into these devices. And so what was going on with these cops is these guys had these iPhones that were sitting in lockup, into evidence lockup, and they all started noticing that they were all rebooting, which screwed them over because apparently the tool sets that they were using to get into these phones after the fact perhaps couldn't get into those phones, couldn't hack into those phones if it was in this post-reboot mode. Now, what I also think is really interesting is when this first started happening, the cops in this private group chat for forensics experts were all trying to speculate what was going on, including, what if when it loses connection to the cellular network that it reboots? Because another thing that is often done by people who, bad guys who steal your phone, but also law enforcement officers who confiscate your phone, they will put it in a Faraday cage, which prevents it from getting signals at all. It basically cuts it off from Wi-Fi, cellular, everything. No signals can get in or out to try to prevent somebody from remotely turning off or wiping that device or doing something that would prevent them from getting into it later. So I think what one of them was speculating was, okay, if this phone kind of detects that it may be in a Faraday bag situation, like all of a sudden all external wireless signals go away, I can't see any Wi-Fi suddenly, I can't see any cellular suddenly, I can't see Bluetooth or anything else suddenly, that kind of looks like somebody put me in a Faraday bag. Maybe I should reboot to be more secure. And I actually think that would be a great idea too. So, maybe Apple will implement that as well, which would be very interesting. But the other thing that they were speculating was that, Apple has this whole Find My Phone network, which basically is this mesh network of all Apple devices, which lets Apple devices talk to each other in a very secure and private way, believe it or not. They did some great engineering around that. That basically lets them talk to each other if for some reason one of them can't talk to the cellular network or to Wi-Fi. So that if one phone is lost, for example, and can't get to cellular and can't get to Wi-Fi, but somebody walks by with another iPhone, they can kind of say to each other, hey, tell Carrie that I'm over here. I can't talk to him for some reason, but hey, if you get to some place where you could talk to Carrie, let him know that this is where I am. And note the location. That's kind of how Find My works. But these law enforcement guys were speculating that maybe what was happening is that somehow the Apple devices were also saying, psst, hey, you look like you're in a bad way here. Maybe you should reboot. And Apple could implement that too. That would just be wild. Anyway, this story just fascinates me from an engineering standpoint. But as Occam's razor usually tells us, the simplest answer is probably the correct one. And that is, in this case, there's no weird technical stuff going on. All it is this device has not been able to connect to a cellular network for a certain amount of time, and it's been idle. And so it just preemptively and proactively reboots itself to try to become more secure, just in case it was stolen. I think that is fantastic. Hats off to Apple and whoever came up with that idea in their security team. All right, next up, if you are a Windows 10 user, Honestly, if you're a Windows user at all, listen up to this one. This is a self-serving post from a company called Zero Patch, which I'd never heard of until this article came out, but it sounds like they're actually doing some very interesting work. And so I don't feel bad about, kind of plugging these guys, but it highlights an issue with Windows, and I have notes. So let me just read this article first from Zero Patch, and that's the number 0patch.com. October 2025 will be a bad month for many Windows users. That's when Windows 10 will receive their last free security update from Microsoft, and the only free way to keep using Windows securely will be to upgrade to Windows 11. Now, many of us don't want to or simply can't upgrade to Windows 11. We don't want to because we got used to Windows 10 user interface and we have no desire to search where some button has been moved to or why the app that we were using every day is no longer there while the system we have is already doing everything we need. We don't want to because of increasing, and I'm going to say Cory Doctorow's favorite new word, enshittification, including bloatware, start menu ads, and serious privacy issues. And by the way, those are all links that if you're interested in these things, you should read the article and definitely go read up on. We don't want to have an automated integrated screenshot and key logging feature constantly recording our activity on the computer. That's the Windows recall feature, which they recently announced and keep pushing back, that I talked about a couple months back. We may have applications that don't work on Windows 11. We may have medical devices, manufacturing devices, point-of-sale terminals, special purpose devices, ATMs that run Windows 10 and can't be easily upgraded. And finally, our hardware may not even qualify for an upgrade to Windows 11. Canalys estimates that 240 million computers worldwide are incompatible with Windows 11 hardware requirements, lacking Trusted Platform Module version 2.0, a supported CPU, 4 GB of RAM, UEFI firmware with secure boot capability, or a supported GPU. So what's going to happen on October 2025? Nothing spectacular, really. Windows 10 computers will receive their last free updates and will, without some additional activity, start a slow decline into an increasingly vulnerable state as new vulnerabilities are discovered, published, and exploited that remain indefinitely present on these computers. The risk of compromise will slowly grow in time, and the amount of luck required to remain unharmed will grow accordingly. The same thing happened to Windows 7 in January of 2020. Today, a Windows 7 machine last updated in 2020 with no additional security patches would be really easy to compromise, as over 70 publicly known critical vulnerabilities affecting Windows 7 have been discovered since. Leaving a Windows 10 computer unpatched after October 2025 will likely open it up to the first critical vulnerability within the first month, and to more and more in the following months. If you plan to do this, at least make sure to make the computer hard to access physically and via network, and I'll come back to that. For anyone else, there are two options to keep Windows 10 running securely. Option 1, extended security updates. If you qualify, Microsoft will happily sell you extended security updates, which means another year, 2, or even 3 of security fixes for Windows 10, just like they have done before with Windows 7, Server 2008, and Server 2012. Extended security updates will be available to consumers for 1 year only until October of 2026 for a price of $30. Educational organizations will have it cheap, just $7 for 3 years, while commercial organizations are looking at spending some serious money. $61 for the first year, $121 for the second, and $244 for the third for security updates, totaling $427 for every Windows 10 computer in 3 years. Now, option 2, and this is the self-serving part, Zero Patch. With October 2025, Zero Patch will security adopt, that's a hyphenated term, will security adopt Windows 10 v22h2, which is the last version that will be published at that point, and provide critical security patches for at least 5 more years, even longer if there's demand on the market. We're the only provider of unofficial security patches for Windows, or virtual patches, not true patches, and we have done this many times before. After security adopting Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008 in 2020, we took care of 6 versions of Windows 10 as their official support ended. Security adopted Windows 11, blah, 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 and it goes on to some other stuff they've done. With Zero Patch, you will be receiving security micro patches for critical, likely to be exploited vulnerabilities that get disclosed after October 14th of 2025. These patches will be really small, typically just a couple of CPU instructions, hence the name, and will get applied to running processes in memory without modifying a single byte of original Microsoft's binary files. So that's really interesting, and I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of that, but the way they patch this stuff is really pretty clever. Anyway, back to the article. There will be no rebooting the computer after a patch is downloaded because applying the patch in memory can be done by briefly stopping the application, patching it, and then letting it continue. Users won't even notice that their computer was patched while they are writing a document, just like servers with zero patch get patched without any downtime at all. All right, so this thing goes on. Basically, they charge, it sounds like they've got two different versions. They've got Zero Patch Pro and Zero Patch Enterprise. It sounds like a really cool service. And I was listening to another podcast, Security Now, and Steve Gibson seemed to think these guys are legit. So if that is something you would consider doing, look into Zero Patch. It sounds like an interesting option for you. However, here's my take on this. First of all, as this article said, if you plan to do it, make sure your computer is hard to access physically and via network. So, yeah, one of the most important protections for your computer when you're at home or in an office is your router, because your router has a firewall in it and does this function called network address translation. It makes it really hard for a bad guy outside of your network to be able to directly talk to and therefore try to compromise the devices inside your network, the things that are behind your firewall and behind this NAT routing. Also, of course, physical access to the computer could make it vulnerable as well, though that's less common today. I mean, unless, if you've got people breaking into your house or breaking into your company to try to hack your computers, that's a whole different scene. But if you have a laptop and you're taking that out and about, then, physical access would be easier. Someone could just steal your laptop. But I would just recommend a couple things. First of all, just update to Windows 11. If you really want to stay on Windows, it is free. It's kind of gone back and forth on how this is to do, but I actually looked it up on Microsoft's website, and it says to upgrade to Windows 11 from Windows 10 Home or Windows 10 Pro to the equivalent editions of Windows 11 is free. For example, Windows 10 Pro to Windows 11 Pro. Check to see if this is an option for you by opening Settings, Privacy and Security, Windows Update. If your PC meets the minimum system requirements, and that's a link that you can check into, and is able to upgrade, you should see an option in Windows Update to upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. So that's the official word from Microsoft. According to them, as long as your PC meets the hardware requirements, and that's a big if, you should at least be able to upgrade for free. So if you're going to keep using Windows, yeah, it's different, and it's not as good probably as Windows 10, but the simple solution there is just to update. Now, if your PC doesn't meet the hardware requirements, then you either need to do this zero patch thing, or really, if it's an old enough computer or weak enough hardware, you might want to consider just upgrading your computer. But let me just throw this out there. If you're really just sick of all the bloatware that comes on Windows PCs, that is just so bad, all the advertising like on your desktop, like putting ads in the start menu is just awful. All the data mining and the horrible security, you really should just consider switching to a Mac. I mean, seriously. I mean, I know that I'm an Apple fanboy, but if you're just doing basic stuff on your computer and you don't need like specific Windows-only applications or things like that, Macs are just better. They just are in so many different ways. First of all the OS updates are free and easy. They just happen. You don't have to pay for them. You don't have to go through all this rigmarole. Most Apple products will get software and security updates for at least 5 years, often longer than that. They don't come with all the really crappy bloatware that Windows PCs usually come with. They're not perfect on privacy, but definitely better than Microsoft. And in my experience, and I've used, Windows, Linux, Mac, I've used all of these computers over the years. The Apple computers just tend to be less frustrating, more convenient, easier to use. And I don't know. I've always preferred Macs. If you haven't tried one, just at least consider it. And I will throw out one more option. If you're a person who normally would have like a Windows laptop and all you're really doing is surfing the web and checking email and maybe running a few productivity apps or whatever, consider getting an iPad. They're actually much more secure than even a Mac computer. They're kind of like smartphones with a big screen, and smartphones tend to be more secure than computers. So you might want to consider getting yourself an iPad, and you could actually get a case that goes with it that has a physical keyboard. If you do a lot of typing, you could just get any Bluetooth keyboard and connect it if you want. You could even connect a mouse to it if you really want. You could make an iPad basically be a laptop. So there's a lot of other options out there is what I'm telling you. But the option you should not consider really is staying with a computer running Windows 10 and not finding some way to continue to get security updates. All right, next up, this is from the Hacker News, and I'm just going to read this really quickly because I'm less interested in this particular article than the broader takeaway. And this is about a particular variant of BitLocker ransomware called ShrinkLocker. Romanian cybersecurity company Bitdefender has released a free decryptor to help victims recover data encrypted using the ShrinkLocker ransomware. The decryptor is the result of a comprehensive analysis of ShrinkLocker's inner workings, allowing the researchers to discover a, quote, specific window of opportunity for data recovery immediately after the removal of protectors from BitLocker encrypted disks, unquote. ShrinkLocker was first documented in May of 2024 by Kaspersky, which found the malware's use of Microsoft's native BitLocker utility for encrypting files as part of extortion attacks targeting Mexico, Indonesia, and Jordan. Bitdefender, which investigated a ShrinkLocker incident targeting an unnamed healthcare company in the Middle East, said the attack likely originated from a machine belonging to a contractor, once again highlighting how threat actors are increasingly abusing trusted relationships to infiltrate the supply chain. Described as simple yet effective, the ransomware stands out for the fact that it's written in VB script, or Visual Basic Script, a scripting language that Microsoft said is being deprecated starting the second half of 2024. That can't come soon enough. Plus, instead of implementing its own encryption algorithm, the malware weaponizes BitLocker to achieve its goals. All right, it goes on a little bit further. Here's the takeaway of this. First of all, if you get hit by ransomware, before you pay, make sure you find out, do some research to see if this particular flavor of ransomware has been solved, fixed, because it's software and software has bugs. Ironically, the bad guys can screw up the software too, in such a way that security researchers may have found a way to work around it and get your files back without you paying money. There's two websites in particular that I usually refer people to, and you can find this on my resources page at firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. One is ID Ransomware, and the other one is No More Ransom. Kaspersky apparently also has a similar page, and you could try them all. But basically what most of them do is they either have you upload a screenshot of the warning text saying, you've been infected, pay this much money to get your files back. Or just to transcribe that and tell them what the message is. Or if you can upload one of the encrypted files, or both. Basically, it uses forensic techniques to try to figure out what flavor of malware you've been hit with. And at that point, they can give you instructions on, your best solutions. And in some cases, they may have the keys to get your data back without you paying. So if you ever do get hit with ransomware, be sure to do this investigation before you pay. All right, next up, a nice little tidbit from Signal, the makers of our favorite end-to-end encrypted messaging app. And just a quick note from them, they say, if you love group calls on Signal, but don't want to create a group chat for every combination of your friends or colleagues, you're in luck. Today, we're launching Call Links. Share a link with anyone on Signal, and in just a tap or click, they can join the call. No group chat required. Call Links join a suite of other features to improve Signal calling, including a raise hand button, emoji reactions, a dedicated calls tab, and a number of improvements to the look and feel of Signal calls. We believe that however you want to communicate, a text, a call, a voice message, a GIF, a video call, a story, you should be able to do it privately. We first introduced private end-to-end encrypted voice calls in Signal calling back in 2014. Keeping with the times, we added video calls in 2017 and group video calls in 2020. In the past, to start a group call in Signal, you needed to first create a Signal group chat, then add people, and only then could you start a group call. Not anymore. Now you can create a quick and easy link that anyone on Signal can use to join a call without having to join a Signal group chat first. And then it goes on to explain how to do this. So if you're interested, you probably already got an email to this effect. But I thought that was really cool, and it's good to see Signal is, keeping up with the times. But even though I haven't tried this yet, assuming it works like they say it do, this is basically kind of a Zoom replacement. We've all learned about Zoom after the pandemic. They were a company before the pandemic, but they got really popular once everybody was working from home. And they claimed all sorts of, security and encryption stuff that they didn't really have. Now, they've improved a lot over the years, but it still costs money for Zoom if you want to have a meeting longer than 40 minutes. So, the downside to this is, unlike Zoom, you can't join a Signal call, at least yet. You can't join it through a web browser. So you still have to have the Signal app installed on your device. But now if you want to do a group video call with several people, you don't have to first organize them into a Signal group chat and then make the call from there. So that's a little more convenient. You can send it in a link and anybody with Signal can join. And I also believe these links are permanent. So you can just keep that link around. And, if you have a weekly call, everyone could just keep using that link. It also has protections about, you can set it so you have to approve everybody that comes into the meeting. So you don't get someone who managed to get the link dropping in unannounced. You can, kick people out of the meeting temporarily or permanently. It's got those kind of features as well. But I thought that was cool. So I thought you just want to be aware of that. And, if you haven't given Signal a try, there's less and less reason not to be using it. All right, just a couple more here. And this one just made me laugh. The headline is, this is from Malwarebytes, air fryers are the latest surveillance threat you didn't consider. Consumer group which is sort of like a Consumer Reports organization, I think in the UK, has warned shoppers to be selective when it comes to buying smart air fryers from Xiaomi, Kosari, or Agostar. I've never heard of the last two. We've learned to expect that smart appliances come with privacy risks, but I really hadn't given my air fryer any thought. Now things are about to change. You don't need to worry about the air fryers sending reports about your eating habits to your healthcare provider just yet, but according to which the air fryer's associated phone apps wanted to know customers' precise locations as well as permission to record audio on the user's phone. The researchers also found evidence that the Agostar and Xiaomi fryers both sent people's personal data to servers in China. This was specified in the privacy notice, but we know not everyone reads a privacy notice, like nobody. So when buying a smart device, it's worth doing these things. First, question the permissions an app asks for on your phone. Does it serve the purpose for you, the user, or is it just some vendor being nosy? 2, read the privacy policy. The vendors are counting on it that you won't, but there are times that privacy policies are very revealing. And 3, ask yourself if the appliance needs to be smart. What's in it for you, and what's the price you're going to pay? An easy solution is not to install the app, and don't provide manufacturers with personal data that they don't need to know. They may need your name for the warranty, but your gender, age, and most of the time your address isn't needed. You shouldn't be surprised to find out that applications that are activated by voice commands are listening to you. How else do you expect them to know you're giving them an order? It's what they do with the information and how well they are secured against abuse by third parties that we should be concerned with. So this one just cracked me up. Why would you buy an air fryer that requires an app? I mean, are you really going to be, remotely monitoring? I don't know. We're taking the smart stuff just a little bit too far. I can see some of these things, I guess if, a washing machine, maybe I would like it to know when the cycle's done because I can't hear it because I'm in the basement or, I don't know. I understand some of these features, but we need to be careful about how many of these things we allow into our house and, how much permission we give these things. One nice thing about stuff that's on Wi-Fi in your home network is, if you're worried about the device itself tattling, you could set up firewall rules inside on your router to prevent some of this stuff from going out, or use a service like NextDNS, which may block some of this traffic. But when an app gets involved, then, that's a whole other can of worms in terms of ways they might be violating your privacy. So one of the reasons I added this article today, of course, was we're going to be talking about the best and worst gifts for people. And smart devices like this are something you need to strongly consider whether or not it makes sense. All right, one more article and then it's time for the tip of the week. And this is from Mac Rumors. And it's about a cool new feature for Apple AirTags. And if you don't remember, Apple AirTags are those little quarter-sized buttons that you can attach to something that will basically let you track it. And where I use mine is mostly with luggage, but I also put it on my laptop bag, my backpack, and other things that I'm afraid that I might leave behind or get stolen. I've heard people using them on their bikes, hiding them somewhere under the seat or things like that. So if their bike is stolen, there's lots and lots of potential uses for these. But one of the big ones is tracking luggage. And that's kind of what this article's about. So let me just read it. Last week, we reported on a new feature in the Find My app in the iOS 18.2 beta that allows you to temporarily share an AirTag's location with a trusted person, and soon with airlines. Apple today announced the feature, providing more details. Apple said that more than 15 airlines will offer the feature in the coming months, including Delta, United, Air Canada, British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, KLM, Lufthansa, Qantas, Singapore Airlines, Air New Zealand, Austrian Airlines, Aer Lingus, Brussels Airlines, Eurowings, Iberia, Swiss, Turkish Airlines, and Vueling. More airlines will follow, quote-unquote, over time. United is aiming to implement the feature system-wide in early 2025, according to a quote from the airline provided in Apple's press release. The feature will be integrated into the airline's customer service process for locating mishandled or delayed baggage, according to Apple. This will make it easier for the airline to help find lost bags with an AirTag attached to them. iPhone, iPad, and Mac users running iOS 18.2, iPadOS 18.2, and macOS Sequoia 15.2 can generate a Share Item Location link in the Find My app. Anyone they share the link with can then view a website with a location of the item on a map. The website will automatically update with the item's last known location. Apple said it worked directly with the airlines to put systems in place to privately and securely accept the Share Item Location links. Access to each link will be, quote, limited to a small number of people, unquote, and recipients will be required to authenticate to view the link through either their Apple account or partner email address. The item's location will stop being shared, quote, as soon as a user is reunited with their item, unquote, or at any time that the item's owner decides. An item's shared location will automatically expire after 7 days. In addition to items equipped with an AirTag, the feature also works with third-party accessories and item trackers that support the Find My network. So anyway, that I thought was pretty cool. Now, of course, these AirTags have been used for nefarious purposes like any technology can, right? They have been used to stalk people. Apple has worked hard and actually worked with Google and Android to come up with techniques that will help you, your phone in particular, notice whether or not there is an AirTag following you around that is not yours and will notify you as such to help you from being tracked with one of these things without your knowledge. So yes, it's a double-edged sword. Technology can cut both ways, but I think this is pretty darn cool. So with that, let's get to my tip of the week, which is this week my annual best and worst gift guide. Now, the full gift guide, as always, can be found on my website. If you go to firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com, you'll find the article there. If you go soon, it will be the top article on the site. And there's a ton of stuff in that article. Lots of links, lots of ideas, including links to previous year's lists. So, if you're really looking for ideas, that is a great place to go. I'm just going to touch on some highlights here today. All right, so just briefly, as we like to say with IoT devices, the Internet of Things devices, all these smart devices, the old mundane devices that are now connected to the Internet, as we like to say, the S in IoT is for security, meaning that there really isn't any. And similarly, I would say that the P in IoT is for privacy, which also means in a lot of cases, these, especially the cheap IoT devices, are really bad for privacy, as we just saw with this connected air fryer. So I'm a techie guy and I love my techie gifts, but they come with caveats. And so one of the overall things I will say is don't cheap out. Don't go for the cheapest possible version of smart switches and smart lights and things like that. They're going to have horrible, horrible security. Go for name brands. Go for companies with a reputation to protect. And yes, spend more money. Not only does that support companies that are doing the right thing, but it incentivizes other companies to step up as well. Now, we're also rushing to add artificial intelligence or AI to everything. The big thing before was connecting everything to internet. Now it's adding AI type features to all those products. And AI can do some absolutely amazing things. It will be a game changer in a lot of ways. Some good, some bad. But the key thing to remember with AI, especially if it's on like a cheap little device, is that it takes a lot of processing power usually. And that probably means that any AI processing is going to need to be done in the cloud. And another thing we like to say is the cloud is just a fancy name for someone else's computer. And so that means that if you're doing AI processing on a cheap little device that doesn't have any horsepower, but it is connected to the internet, more than likely what's happening is that request is going off to the internet on some cloud server that you don't own, that could be, hacked or may just be insecure, or they may just straight up be sharing data with someone else to make money. And you can't control that. So just be aware that, when you're looking at these AI features, that some of that could come with privacy risks. So another thing I usually like to throw out when I talk about my gift list is just because somebody already has a smart device that does something doesn't mean you can't buy them a better one. So if they have a super cheap version of something that is really bad for security or privacy, your gift could be to give them a better one. So if that is the case, and if you are replacing an existing device, make sure you decommission that device before recycling it or reselling it or whatever you're going to do with it. Some of those devices may have your data built into them. Some of them may be associated with your account. So let's say you're getting rid of like an Amazon Fire TV box and you're replacing it with an Apple TV box. That Amazon Fire TV box is associated with somebody's Amazon account, most likely. So you need to make sure that you disassociate or disconnect that device from that account before you try to sell it, or someone else who gets your device may not only be able to potentially access your Amazon account, but they also could be accessing your Netflix account or your Paramount Plus or, whatever apps you had running on there where you've been logged into that account. If you just take that box and hand it to someone else, they're going to be able to access all that stuff as if they were you. So just before you give away a smart device, make sure you have properly cleansed it and reset it to factory settings. And if there's any accounts associated with that you've disassociated with them, you've disconnected those accounts before you get rid of that device. Now, one more thing I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to stay away from the politics of this, but we just had a big administration change here in the United States, and the incoming administration is claiming that they are going to put a lot of tariffs on imported goods, which a lot of our electronics, let's face it, all of them, almost all of them, are imported from some other country and probably countries that would be affected by these tariffs. So if you were considering, if you have been considering getting somebody a high cost item that might fall under these tariffs things, maybe this holiday season is the time to do that. And I could get into how tariffs actually work because there's been a lot of confusion about who actually pays these tariffs. But at the end of the day, I'm telling you, your costs will go up. These things will become more expensive to you, the consumer who wishes to purchase them. So if you're looking to get a PlayStation 5 or, a big television or some other high dollar electronic device, you might want to do it sooner rather than later. Okay, so let's start off with just some general notes on the worst gifts for privacy and security. Topping that list, as always, is DNA testing kits. And it's gotten worse this year. I say this every year, but it's gotten worse this year because one of the big companies, 23andMe, is looking like it might go under. And if they go under, they're going to be trying to satisfy their creditors by giving them as much money as possible. And one of the things that they have that has the most value is, you guessed it, your data and your DNA. So if you have not already, and I've mentioned this on the show a couple months back, if you haven't already, I would ask 23andMe to delete your data and then close your account. It may already be too late. I don't know what laws might apply to this, if they will be able to sell your data. You can look at the privacy policies. Those privacy policies probably can change without notice. And from what I've heard, it's tricky to actually get them to do this, but I would still try to do this. And then certainly don't give anybody one of these things as a gift. It's a privacy nightmare. Your DNA is literally you. It's your genes. It's what makes you up. There is no way to use one of these services and then have them anonymously share this for research with other companies, because you can't, your DNA cannot be anonymous. As I just mentioned, you got to be really careful when you're getting smart devices. I would particularly avoid, if you can, getting any of the smart devices from advertising companies, in particular Google and Facebook. They make, little digital assistants and smart speakers and things. And I would just assume that they are collecting as much data about you as possible. It will be difficult to find the privacy settings to turn that off, if you can find them at all. And you may not be able to disable all data sharing. I would probably throw Amazon in with that as well, and also recognize that those three companies have bought out a lot of other companies like Ring, Nest, Fitbit, Waze, Blink, Eero, Roomba, Twitch. Again, there's a list on my website if you want to check this out. Be careful in particular for giving those devices, because there's a lot of negative privacy implications. Similarly, fitness and other tracking devices. There are some companies that are making tracking devices like smartwatches for kids. Some of those, like Angel Watch, are really, really bad. Be careful of giving those as gifts. Even things like Fitbit and Halo, some of these other devices that are owned by bigger companies that are known for data mining, you got to be really careful, and it's hard to protect your data with some of these devices. So I know they're really convenient. I know they make really cool techie gifts. Just be careful when you're doing it. Make sure you understand the privacy implications. And obviously, we just had this great discussion with Stacey Higginbotham about IoT devices and what she calls software tethering. And that's something to keep in mind as well. So if you missed that one last week, you should definitely go back and check out that interview. All right, so let's move on. Some of the best gifts for privacy and security. Well, there's obviously ones that top the list perennially. Those would be things like a password manager. I tend to recommend Bitwarden. 1Password is all right. Proton Pass is actually pretty good. That's kind of a new one on the block. Certainly, if you're already a Proton customer, I would certainly check out Proton Pass. Also, a subscription to a actual privacy-respecting VPN service. Again, Proton VPN was a good choice there. Mullvad makes a great one. You can look at my website for some more recommendations. For everybody out there who's using some sort of cloud storage or cloud syncing service like Dropbox or Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive, they're very popular. They're pushed very hard. Certainly, Microsoft tries to get you to use their OneDrive. It's almost hard to avoid. But there are better solutions for that, because even though all those cloud services do have encryption, both in transit and at rest, they hold the keys to the stuff as it's encrypted on their servers, meaning that a rogue employee or perhaps a hacker or somebody else could get in there and still root around your files, which is not ideal for privacy. So there's some various solutions to that. I have been using for many years a company called sync.com, SYNC. That's an interesting service. They have the ability for you to set your own private key, meaning that makes it so that even they can't read your data. You should also look at a great free open source tool called Cryptomator to set up vaults, which are just special folders that are encrypted so that you could store that in a cloud synced service and it will be fully encrypted so that even they won't be able to read those files. And Apple now has something called advanced data protection as part of their iCloud service. I can't remember, but I think you might have to have one of the paid tiers to use that. I can't remember. But even so, their cheapest tier is like 99 cents a month, which would make it a gift, right? You could pay for that service. Similarly, private email services. Again, Proton is the easy button go-to answer there. There are others like Tuda that you could look at. You might just consider something like Fastmail. It's not specifically privacy oriented, but it is a for-pay service. And so they don't have to monetize your data in order to make money, unlike a lot of the free email services. And just generally speaking, as you've probably picked up on, I generally recommend Apple products. Again, they are not perfect, and they even do some limited amounts of advertising, which is a conflict of interest. I wish they would just not do that. But they are largely, almost completely driven by hardware sales, unlike Google. So whether it's for altruistic reasons or if it's just a marketing perspective for them to, say they're a private company, they do tend to be more private than Microsoft or Google. Again, I realize they're not perfect, but in today's world, if you're going to go with some of these devices like a streaming TV box, I would absolutely go with Apple TV over Fire TV or Google TV or Android TV or whatever they call it. All right, so how about some specific stuff? So I just upgraded my home router. If your router's getting long in the tooth and doesn't support modern encryption technology like WPA3, ideally, or at least WPA2, maybe it's time to get somebody a new router. And you could spend lots and lots of money on routers. Some of these have crazy features for speed that most people, unless you're a really full tilt gamer, probably don't care about. I just recently picked up a new one for myself. I had a Synology router for many years that I really liked, and it did well, and then it started getting really flaky, and I ended up getting actually a recommendation from one of my patrons for a company I'd never heard of. It's gl.inet. I'd never heard of it, and their Flint router was the one I picked up. It's like $90 on sale on Amazon, and it's a great little router, and it's been fantastic. It solved my problems, and it's open source firmware, which is really nice. It's running a flavor of OpenWRT. And it's got some other great privacy filters built in, like VPN and other things like that. So there's a specific idea for a router you might want to look at. Another service you might want to look at that I really enjoy using is called NextDNS. They actually do have a free tier, but if you do enough queries like I do, if you have enough devices in your home, you're probably going to want one of the paid tiers. And it's really good for blocking a lot of ads and other crap and even some malware. Check out NextDNS. I've just talked about the Apple AirTags. Those are fun little stocking stuff for gifts. I recommend buying them in bulk. If you get a 4-pack, it's a lot cheaper than getting them individually. There's usually a lot of Black Friday sales around this. Not at Apple. You probably have to go to Amazon or someplace like that, or Best Buy or Target. Look for your Black Friday sales. Apple doesn't do a lot of that kind of stuff. Their quote-unquote sales are usually pretty weak. But anyway, if you buy a 4-pack, you can get a pretty good deal on AirTags, like less than $20 a piece. If you travel a lot and you need to charge your devices, first of all, I would recommend just getting a portable charger, a battery pack that you can use to charge your devices, or, plenty of those new GAN, G-A-N gallium nitride. I forget what GaN stands for, but they make really nice, small, compact, but powerful wall chargers. I would not use public USB ports if at all possible. I don't know how likely it is, but it is possible to hack devices through some of these public ports. So we're talking, airports, airlines, like actually on the plane itself, rental cars, other places where you might be tempted to want to charge. Don't use a public port. You don't know where that port has been. So get yourself either a portable battery charger or get some of those really nice wall nuggets, and then you won't have to worry about it. Or if you want, you can also try using what we lovingly call a USB condom, which is a special kind of power-only cable that doesn't allow data to transfer on it. So it's a USB cable, but USB cables have both data lines and power lines. And these particular either adapters or cables don't have the data lines at all. Like they don't even exist. They only have the power lines. So what this will mean, of course, is that the charging might be slow because sometimes those data lines are used to do smart charging, which allows it to charge faster. But in a pinch, if you want to charge on a dirty public USB port, you really should have a power-only cable or a data blocker cable or adapter. Now, we talked about Faraday pouches today. That's another interesting kind of techie gift for people that are worried about their devices giving them away. If you get a Faraday cage, you could put, sometimes you might want to put your wallet in there because a lot of our credit cards now are wirelessly tappable, which means that somebody theoretically could come close to you and maybe read your credit card information or try to use your credit card. Same thing for passports. A lot of those have RFIDs built into them now that you might not want radiating all the time. So you can get somebody a passport holder that blocks that or a wallet that blocks those signals. Or you could buy a Faraday bag that people can put their phones in if they want to make sure that they're kind of off the grid. This is a little bit out there for most people, honestly. But if you're interested, my article has several ideas around that. And then I'll wrap it up with two more things. And this first one is self-serving, and that is my book. My latest edition of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, the thing that started this whole podcast and the blog and the newsletter and everything, is in its 5th edition now, and it's come a long way. It's like 600 pages long. Now, about half of that is pictures, so don't let that throw you off. But it's got over 200 tips in it. And most of these tips are really low-hanging fruit. Like these are all simple things. Most of them are free things. Most of them are easy things to do that will improve your security and privacy. It makes a great gift to give to other people. As a techie person, you may know a lot of the things that are in this book already, though I'll guarantee that there's going to be some things in there you probably don't. I've had a lot of my techie friends look through the book and say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. So even for techie people, it's a good gift, but it's also a great easy button gift to give to people in your family or friends that are constantly asking you for advice or how to do something, or better yet, to help you do something. Well, the book has got pictures and step-by-step instructions in it and all sorts of explanations about why these things are important. But if they're impatient people, they could just skip to the back of every chapter and just goes through the checklist. So that's one idea. Now, the other idea is something I came up with a few years ago, and I call them dragon coupons. But you remember back in the day when you were broke as a kid and you wanted to get something nice for your parents, let's say, or maybe for your girlfriend, and you didn't have a lot of money. And so you come up with these like, I love you coupon things, right? Little coupon books. I'll do chores or give you a back massage or, whatever. And that was a little personal gift you could give that would basically be effort on your part because you didn't have the money. Well, I decided to create some dragon coupons with kind of a similar flair. And the idea being that you can put these little coupons in their stockings or wrap it up as a gift, however you want to do it. And it's basically a gift of your time and effort. And this is for helping them do things like set up a password manager or set up two-factor authentication or help them set up an automated backup of all their files so they don't lose their files if something were to happen to their computer. And so it's a PDF file. It's free to download. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to fdsd.me/coupons, plural. If you go to that link, you can find this file, and there's some instructions in the beginning of the file for the giver. And every page has got both a coupon on it that you can cut out and clip and put in someone's stocking or whatever, and then some instructions at the bottom. And that instructions at the bottom is kind of a bullet list of the things that I think, the 3 to 5 things that you should do to complete this task. And just to tie it into the book, each of those bullet items also refers to any tips in the book that correspond to these things. So it's a great way to help other people and offer your time and effort to protect their data and their devices. And by the way, the more of us that do these things, the better off we all are. So it's not purely altruistic. You're actually helping yourself as well, right? If you're helping, someone in your family, protect their laptops, then next time they come over your house and get on your Wi-Fi, you don't have to necessarily worry as much that their laptop might be compromised and then therefore trying to compromise your devices. So those are some top items. You can look to my article for more, and plus lots of links to other ideas. So go to firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com and look for the latest and greatest gift guide for 2024. And there you have it, your news and your tip of the week. All right, everybody, that'll do it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. This holiday season is fast approaching. I've got kind of my usual end-of-year special episodes and things coming up. I'll tell you more about those as they come. For my top patrons this week, you'll get your usual Merlin's Musings bonus podcast. This week will be the final part of my 4-part series about a high-level description of how HTTPS and TLS works. That will come out Thursday morning as usual. Next week is my interview with Carissa Valise. I've been dying for this. I'm literally waiting for over 3 years for this interview. Ever since she wrote her book, Privacy is Power, I've been wanting to interview her, and it finally happened, and you will not be disappointed. It was a great interview. Really, really cool to talk to her. She's got such a great perspective. She's a basically ethics and philosophy professor, so talking about privacy. So it's really, really interesting. That'll be next week. I can't wait for you to hear that. And I've got a lot of other great interviews in the pipeline. So if you haven't subscribed, you should absolutely do so, and that way you'll be sure not to miss any of that great content coming your way. All right, that'll do it this week. Take care, everybody. Stay safe out there. And as always, don't get caught with your drawbridge stuff.